We are back talking about the NFL and the 2026 offseason, this time about the Kansas City Chiefs. So when we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, Charles Goldman joins us from A to Z Sports. Charles, thanks for doing this as always. I know you're always a busy man.
Happy to be here. Happy to talk some Chiefs football with you. I know we always go through this every offseason. It's always one of my favorite parts.
Well, yeah, and for the first time, we're actually going to have a conversation about the Chiefs and how their offseason is going to be very important. Not usually the case. Usually it's the regular season, the postseason, but this particular year, it just happened to be the postseason, and maybe, the postseason, the offseason. Maybe it's just because sooner or later, when you're running a sort of like a dynasty like the Chiefs have been running, you run out of gas, and now you got to recoup and get going. And the biggest thing that the Chiefs have to just do is now just hope it's just 1 year. That's it. Move right back into it because Patrick Mahomes still in the prime of his career. So a lot to talk about here and a lot of questions to ask. Before I start asking the questions, what is the mind frame of the fan base? How did they treat this past season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were disappointed. They look at every single year that Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback as an opportunity to go out there and win a Super Bowl, and this team was very far from that. I know that the players and the coaches, to some extent, believed that they were close, right? They lost a lot of one-score games, whereas the year before they won a lot of one-score games. But I think that the fan base kind of grew tired of that thought that this team was close, when in reality there were a lot of things working against them throughout the season, whether it was missteps on the personnel side of things or struggles with the scheme. We look at the Chiefs of these last several years, and their offense has always been known for innovation and explosion, and that just wasn't there. And I think you can point to a lack of execution as the primary reason that wasn't there. I've been enjoying telling fans, the Chiefs still practice all the trick plays and all the cool stuff that you've seen them bust out over the years. They do that often to keep guys engaged, but the fact that they couldn't even execute the simple plays, the stuff that, is just everyday run of the mill, they're not going to use those plays in the games if they can't execute the simple stuff. So I think execution was a big problem. Lots of penalties, lots of issues with drop passes, unforced errors, things that they can control. And I think this next year, they're looking to kind of clean that up quite a bit. And then from the personnel side of things, some of it was luck and bad luck. They did not really have a great free agent class at all. I don't think they really managed to find a single consistent contributor in their free agent class. And that combined with drafting really low in the first round and really low in every round of the draft for the last couple of years, I think caught up with them a little bit in the sense that their roster just didn't have kind of that blue chip premium talent throughout as it kind of has in many years recently.
Yeah, it's almost like they were trying to patch together the best way possible the team that went to the Super Bowl in 2024, and then they kind of just, all right, well, let's just do it again. That's just the way it felt when it was all said and done. It's like, no, you can't do it again. Maybe what they actually needed was not a loss in the Super Bowl or an embarrassing loss in the Super Bowl, but what they needed was just not making the postseason. And it was almost like maybe they should have been smart enough. I don't know whether or not they were hamstrung by the cap, but you still figure that, again, you mentioned the draft, and even though you're drafting farther and farther all the time, still you got to start hitting on some of those or making some deals in order to, sort of like the Rams have made. I mean, the Rams were just in a terrible situation a couple years ago, and it took them a year. Boom, they're right back into it, and that's what the Chiefs have got to figure out to do as well. So because of that, of course, the fans were disappointed, but were they criticizing anybody in particular? Were they pointing the finger at anyone?
Yeah, I think the offensive coaching staff caught the brunt of it, but I think everyone shared in the blame. Special teams was not as good as it had been in years prior. I think some of that spoke to the fact that, the roster just in general
Sure.
wasn't great. It always affects special teams if you don't have the right personnel. And then, with the offense, I think people grew tired a little bit of Matt Nagy. They thought of him maybe as a yes man, as someone who wasn't challenging Coach Reid because of his relationship with Coach Reid and his return to Kansas City. And that departure was kind of interesting how it transpired. I think the Chiefs did a lot of work to try and make it look as clean as possible, as clean a split. And look, I do think there was an extent of this that was real when they come out and say this was the plan all along this season, that Nagy informed the team that he wanted an opportunity to become a head coach again, and that he wasn't intending to renew his contract. And I think you can look at kind of the media campaign that came out this offseason to try and get him a head coaching job, and look no further than that to understand that to be true. But
how did that dynamic work when he came back? What was the difference? Who was there before Nagy?
It was Eric Bieniemy.
Oh, was okay. So Nagy was there for how long? 3 years.
So Nagy came back after the Bears fiasco, and he was senior offensive assistant and quarterbacks for 1 year. And then when Bieniemy left, Nagy had took over as offensive coordinator, and this past year was his third season in that role.
So what was the difference between the way the Chiefs ran the offense, or was there a difference as far as control and how the team ran the offense pre-Nagy and then during Nagy?
I think it was different. The main thing that I look at as kind of the difference and as what the Chiefs need in an offensive coordinator, which is what I think they're getting now with Eric Bieniemy coming back, is they need the disciplinarian. They need someone to take that part of it off of Andy Reid's plate, because Andy Reid really these last 3 years played that role. And I mentioned I was on a KC Sports Network's podcast, 21 Questions, the other day, and was asked a question about what I thought of the coaching changes. And one thing I pointed out, which I don't know a lot of people if they picked up on it, but Andy Reid, the Chiefs, the way they practice throughout the week. So Wednesday, Thursday practice, they have their media availability before practice. Friday practice, they have it after practice. And after games, obviously, but also after that practice, Andy was always a little bit more hoarse than on those Wednesday and Thursday practices. He's out there yelling, chewing guys out, right? There was never really like Matt Nagy's MO. I think he was more of, the former player coach in the sense that like he's trying to be one of the guys. And I think, Eric Bieniemy approaches it from a standing of, he's not trying to be one of the guys. He's trying to be for the guys what his coaches were for him when he was in the league and when he was in, college football and so on and so forth.
He's a hard ass. And that's been effective with the Chiefs. That's for sure.
There's a difference between that approach. And I think that's the one that they really need, because it's going to allow Andy Reid to focus on some other things. And you look at the changes that they made throughout that coaching staff as well. You take the wide receiver coach, Connor Embrate, very inexperienced. Todd Pinkston, running back coach, who played wide receiver in his career for Andy Reid. He never played running back, right? He's coaching the running backs, very inexperienced. Those are the two offensive coaches that they moved on from this offseason.
Okay.
And they haven't replaced the running back coach yet. They are interested in Dylan McCullough, who's with the Raiders right now under contract there. We'll see if Clint Kubiak keeps him. If not, then he'll probably have an opportunity to interview with Kansas City and come back to Kansas City. And then there's Chad O'Shea, who's a 20-year veteran NFL wide receiver coach. So you bring in a lot of guys with the E word, with experience, right? And that's going to allow Andy Reid to take a step back, to delegate a little bit more than he has been these last 3 years, and get back to doing what he does best, which is designing plays, coming up with game plans, and so on and so forth. And I don't think he's been able to focus on that entirely as much as he'd like to. And, when you look at kind of his downfall with the Philadelphia Eagles organization, a lot of that had to do with him doing too much, right? To the front office and playing general manager in addition to playing head coach. And there's a level of trust and delegation that I think he needs to have in his staff to be successful. And looking at the moves they're making this offseason, I think that they're going to get there.
Okay. All right. So let's now get to a couple other things. We have again, I mentioned with the cap. Right now, if you just look at it on paper, it's the worst in the league. But what do they have to do? They're going to have to do anything like cut anyone. We know that they're going to restructure. Everybody does. That's how they'll get back to where they need to. But since they're so far at the bottom, give me a couple of players who might be cap casualties. Might be in a situation where
Chief is weighing in.
Might be in a situation where they're going to have to think about another job somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that, there's going to be some salary cap casualties, so to speak. When you look at the 32 of 32 type ranking they have with the salary cap space right now, I think that, it's surprising because they have the least amount of dead money of any team in the NFL. So this is not like a gross mismanagement of the salary cap, right?
Sure.
It's not. It's by design that it's so much in the red right now. And look, they have a lot of different ways that they can rectify that. You mentioned the restructures and whatnot. They have probably about 5 or 6 guys that they can restructure to get some sort of cap space, but they're going to have to be cautious with that because they also can't really kick the can too far down the road. Next year, they're also going to need salary cap relief, so they have to kind of go about it a certain way. I think there are 3 guys who I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that they're going to get cut, and that would be Jawan Taylor. I think he has the 3rd highest cap hit on the team behind Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes there.
$20 million.
For what they're getting out of him and whatnot, they're going to have to cut him or extend him. I would be shocked if they extended him with the struggles that he has had.
Yeah.
In terms of just lining up properly and the pre-snap penalties, and that's just been a headache that they have not been able to solve. And I also think he's had an issue with his knee. And I think the Chiefs have worked around that for a long time. It hasn't really stifled his play too much, but I think long-term outlook, it's just time to cut ties there.
Okay.
And Mike Dana, he's a guy who signed a contract, I think, a couple of years ago. And this last season, I don't think he lived up to what that contract was. They need to get better on the edges, and Dana was not that this past year. With the savings that he can get, I think he's one that I think he's over 8.5 or something like that.
Almost 9. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So like you can save that money, find a different guy to kind of play that same role that he's been playing as kind of a rotational type edge rusher, either the starter one week or the first backup another week, and then Drew Tranquil is another guy that I think the Chiefs will probably move on from, lower in dead money, right? But decent savings there.
600.
Yeah, and I think right there you can save about 35-ish million, right, between those 3 guys, and that gets you close, right? And then you can restructure or extend or rip up Patrick Mahomes' deal and do something there. I think the interesting thing about this offseason too is I think before the Patrick Mahomes knee injury, everyone kind of suspected that they're going to tear up Patrick Mahomes' deal, give him a new deal, and kind of reset that one because he simply wasn't on par with some of the new quarterback contracts and the money there. And now with the knee injury, I'm a little bit more skeptical that that'll happen. I think that maybe they stick with the restructure and just wait and see, because it's kind of uncomfortable to go and hand out a whole bunch of guaranteed money when you got a guy coming off a major knee injury, and you just want to see. I don't think that they have any doubt in their mind that Pat's going to come back and not be Pat, but I think you got to see it, right?
Sure.
And I think that his camp will probably understand that if that's the way they go. That they just want to see it, and then all of a sudden they can figure something out kind of on the other end of that.
Okay.
And then there's a couple more guys like Chris Jones, Nick Bolton,
Sure.
Creed, Karloff. I think those guys have restructure potential in their contracts. Guys who are going to be around. I don't think they're going anywhere. So those are probably the guys you're going to want to look at for the simple restructures and moving around the bonus or the base salary, excuse me. But it's not as we say it's the worst salary cap situation in the league. It's not.
Yeah,
it's manageable, right?
Sure, it always is. Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, right? We I like to joke that like it's a couple strokes of the pen, but it's a little more than that, and a lot of talking, a lot of doing, a lot of planning. But that's why Brett Veach and his staff get paid a paycheck, right? So they'll undoubtedly figure that out. They have until legal tampering period, March 11th, when the new league year begins to get that all situated and set. And knowing them, it's probably all going to happen in the span of 2 days, and I'll be ripping my hair out writing like a billion articles about it all. But fun
articles about the cap. Yeah.
Right.
So does that mean though that, because obviously the difference between being able to get cap compliant and being able to spend in free agency, there's two separate things. So do you have enough information right now to know whether or not the Chiefs will be able to add on X amount of players, or if they can add one player or two players, what kind of dollar figure we're looking at, or is it too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell. We'll have to see what moves they make to kind of see, where, because they can free up a lot of space. I mean, they can get up to, I think, around 60 or 70 million over the cap.
Depending. Yes.
It just depends. And, we'll see where, if Clark Hunt's willing to, put his money on the line here. I think, after this last season and seeing how the free agent class turned out, I wouldn't be shocked if they're a little bit more frugal in the free agent market.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's time to rebuild in a way. I think it's time to get younger. I think it's time to start worrying more about the draft and free agents.
Right. And, that's a problem because they don't have a whole lot of draft capital. But, and the Chiefs like to do a situation, right, where, you're week one ready before the draft, right? You fill all the quote unquote holes you have, and you could go out there and play a game, after free agency. And I just, with all the holes they have, I don't know that that's realistic right now. But the nice thing with that is you've got the number 9 overall draft pick,
that's
which
right.
is a pick that they consider premium. It's a pick that is higher than the last time they selected someone in the top 10, which was moving up to take Patrick Mahomes at number 10 overall. And to be very frank, within the organization, they view this opportunity at number 9 to get a true difference maker, in the sense of, like, the last time you picked in the top 10, you got a Patrick Mahomes.
Sure.
Right. Now, maybe, you're not going to obviously draft a quarterback, but and that's the biggest difference maker you can get for an NFL team. However, my understanding is that highest levels of the organization, they want to get that type of level of difference maker here, because they believe that they can be right back in the mix of things, and that they might not have this opportunity again. That
they don't want the opportunity again.
Right.
Yeah.
So, knowing that they see that as a premium pick, they may be a little bit more comfortable going into the draft with some holes, knowing that they're going to have an opportunity to add a couple of premium guys, right? They have 3 picks in the top 75. So lots of opportunity there to add some difference makers to this team.
You mentioned out of those 3 players, Taylor, Tranquill, and Dana, would Tranquil be the guy that actually performed the best? And is it more of, yeah, we could save, but we have some more depth here? I know that we're going to get into another big signing that they have to, another free agent they have to bring back at linebacker. But do you just think that even though he played well enough, that he's just not that much of a difference maker, and the savings is more important?
Yeah, I think that the savings are more important. He's getting a little more up there. Reliability in terms of health is always a concern.
Okay.
I think he's kind of just run his course with the team, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, he'll
Sure.
still stick around the league and probably
Yeah.
go and play for another team and have a successful career. But I also think they have guys waiting in the wings at that position, so to speak. Right. Last year they spent draft capital on linebacker out of Oregon, who Jeffrey Bassa, who didn't really play much on the defensive side of the ball in that first year. He was more of I would say a bit of a red shirt type. He played a lot of special teams, but his opportunities on defense were few and far between. And I think he's a guy who could slot into that Mike Dana role for Kansas City. His athleticism really popped in those last couple games that he actually got some action in. And then there was a undrafted free agent, Cooper McDonald. He's a guy who probably is the favorite, I would say, in the clubhouse right now to fit in for Leo Chenal at the Sam linebacker position. So I would say that, like, those two guys, you could keep Nick Bolton right in there, and those two guys would potentially be options for KC if they were to move on from Drew, and then if they were to lose Leo in free agency.
All right. Because I definitely, matter of fact, let's continue along that line then, because I want to find out about more of those younger players, those developing players that do need to fill those holes, because that is important. Anybody outside of Kansas City who doesn't really know much about these types of players because they're not household names yet, and they're trying to figure out exactly where Kansas City is going to really be more desperate to fill specific needs, but you'll be able to say, okay, well, X player, like you said, Cooper McDonald, if they need to move on from one of the free agents that we want to talk about, and that's Chenal, whether or not that's something that they're looking to do, or it's like a backup in case they can't re-sign Chenal. So let's start first before we go into the free agents and just go with more of this development thing. So you got Bassa. And you think Bassa, right now, the plan is to move him in, to move on from Tranquil, and just have him hopefully move into the role that Tranquil had at weak side?
Yeah, I think that would be the ideal for Kansas City, is if Bassa could do that, take that jump in year two.
Okay.
They'll probably, hedge their bets a little bit, whether it's, adding another linebacker in the draft or finding another free agent type.
Cheaper one. Yeah.
Right. They've already added a undrafted free agent to a reserve future contract, Cam Arnold. He's an intriguing prospect. They've got some bodies there. Brandon George is a guy who spent all season on injured reserve that they're really high on before he got hurt. So he's definitely a possibility to kind of fit in there. But okay. I do think this is the type of year where they probably lean into the fact that, like, the linebacker room has mostly, outperformed expectations the last several years, and that they're being coached up, pretty nicely so far. And they can probably go leaner there in terms of their investment, knowing that they've got a good coaching staff and can kind of get guys coached up.
Okay, would those be the only two young guys on defense that could make that type of a jump, or is there any other players we should be keeping an eye on?
Noel Williams is probably looking at a starting cornerback job next season, potentially. I would say if there's going to be a trio of them, it'd be, McDuffie, Williams, and Christian Fulton. I think that, Jalen Watson, he's a free agent, probably going to end up hitting the market just because of how much it would cost to retain him. Trent McDuffie's still under contract for one more year on the 5th-year option. Chiefs would probably like to extend McDuffie, but there's always a possibility that they trade him, right? With cheap contract. it's fully guaranteed, so it's all against the salary cap. So if they were to trade McDuffie now, he's a blue chip type player. So I think the return would have to be right to trade him. I think they'd probably prefer to extend him. However, if you can get, like you're mentioning, right, you need draft capital to get this roster a little bit younger. So if you have an opportunity to trade him for some premium picks, and you're able to do that and help your salary cap situation, I think it's something you have to consider.
Awesome.
Christian Fulton's a guy who wasn't healthy at the beginning of last season, but came on towards the end of the year and proved that he can be a starter. So a pair of Fulton and Williams on the outside as your starters, if you were to move on from McDuffie, could make sense. Fulton's another guy who could be a cap casualty, though. He has
Who's that?
Christian Fulton.
Oh, he could also be one. Okay.
Right. He's another one who, they could save some money by moving on from him. However, I think that would defeat the purpose. There's a reason they signed him to a 2-year deal instead of a 1-year deal last year. And I think they kind of knew that it was going to take some time for him to get back from the injury he was dealing with. Probably took a little more than they expected. However, they got to see at the end of the season, hey, this is what this guy can be when he's healthy, which is a contributor, a starter, a playmaker. So I think that's, something that they're going to have to keep in mind there, as they kind of traverse the offseason here.
Okay.
Another name at the cornerback position to keep in mind, Kevin Knowles. I don't know if I see him here on the
he's there
on the list. Okay, is he there? There he is.
He's at nickel, actually.
Okay, cool.
Is that where he should be?
Yeah, that's where he should be.
Okay.
I think he's a nickel corner option for Kansas City. I think Chris Wallace is a very interesting player in that he can do a lot. I think towards the end of the year, before he got hurt, I should say, he was playing kind of deep safety, single high looks, and whatnot, more so than he was playing the slot. He can do both. But I think the Chiefs kind of realized that he was their best guy that they had for playing that single high safety look, and even probably in two high looks in the safety spot as well. So I think that his future is probably at safety. Trent McDuffie's the best nickel guy they have, but I would say that Kevin Knowles towards the end of the season with McDuffie going on injured reserve, he got some really good experience there and was probably a bit more impressive than you'd think for, an undrafted free agent who's a little bit on the smaller side. So I think he's a guy who will likely be, a key core special team contributor, but also potentially depth at that nickel corner spot.
Okay. So does that mean that right now, so it sounds like there's a lot of different possibilities here
Yes.
in the secondary more than anything.
Yeah, the secondary, it needs work, but this is a group that has typically outperformed expectation in my eyes. They have a really, really good coach there in the secondary. Obviously, Steve Spagnuolo's, his background is in the secondary, so they're gonna have good guys working back there. This again might be one of those years where they have to kind of go lean there and lean on the fact that they have a good coaching staff and that they can put guys in the best position. I think the area probably on the defense that needs the most improvement is going to be the defensive trenches. And they do have some guys there who could potentially step up. Ethan Downs is a guy who had some nice plays on special teams towards the end of the year. He was elevated to the 53, signed to the 53. Zach Pickens is a guy who played some snaps towards the end of the year. He's at the very least a rotational defensive line guy who can, eat some of those snaps and give you some good downs on run defense, and then also offer a little bit as a pass rusher. And he's still young.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me.
He was a pretty high pick too.
Right. I think he was second round pick. Right. So, he's got potential, but he obviously didn't live up to it in Chicago, and now is trying to find that opportunity here in Kansas City. He's someone who I expect to be a bit of a contributor this next year, just because they're losing a lot of bodies on the D line. Jerry Tillery, Derek Nottie, Mike Pennell, Charles Omenihu. Those are all free agents right there, and they need to just replace snaps more than anything, I think, on that interior. And with Omar Norman Lott coming back from an ACL injury, I think that Pickens is going to be a guy who sees a lot of action, at least early on there.
Okay. So anybody on offense fitting the same role?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously they're going to be looking for Josh Simmons to pick up where he left off. He had the wrist
Sure.
dislocation towards the end of the season. Um, Essapol is a guy who could potentially be in the running for a swing tackle job, or if they do move on from Jawan Taylor, they're going to need a new starter at right tackle. So there's going to be a bit of a competition there. I think the interesting thing about Kansas City right now is they've got like a lot of guys under contract at the offensive tackle position. I think six, seven or eight, maybe. So there's a lot of guys who kind of fit that at the offensive tackle position. Um, and Jalen Moore is probably the one who's the favorite to take over as a starter at right tackle. But I think all the Chiefs fans would tell you that his snaps at right tackle last season were not as impressive as they would have hoped. I think he was probably a better fit at the left side when he had to fill in for Simmons than when he had to fill in on the right side for Taylor. So that's something they're going to have to work through. Wanya Morris is a guy who played a lot for this team, but hasn't had a whole lot of success. I think Chu Godric, he's toolsy, but again, hasn't played a whole lot of football. Got some great experience this last year. Ethan Driscoll is a guy I know they were really high on after his rookie season. He missed the entirety of last season after having a ruptured appendix in training camp. And so he missed the whole last year. I don't know how that will turn out for his development, but he's a potential guy who could sneak in there and surprise some folks. Okay. And then there's Matt Waletzko, who they signed to a reserve future deal, who was on the practice squad for a little bit. He's someone who could potentially slot in there. His early career in the NFL was kind of disrupted by injury. It stunted his growth a little bit. So I think they're betting more on the traits and the intangibles with him. But
okay.
The fact that they have 8 guys right now at the offensive tackle position, and let's say they do get rid of Taylor, that brings it down to 7. I just have a hard time seeing them, go out of their way to invest a whole lot there unless they find a situation where they're like, okay, this is a surefire solution. We're not going to have to worry about the offensive line again. We got our guy. We can let the other guys, brawl it out for, the reserve spots, and whatever will be. But I don't think that they're going to actively be looking to add in free agency at this spot or, draft a high draft pick unless a stud just falls into their laps.
Okay. Let's stick with the young players. So the rookie class, how did the rookie class do this past season?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't call it a failure, but I think it was a bit of a disappointment. Obviously Josh Simmons, fantastic start to the season, was looking like the type of player who could really compete for, some high level recognition as a rookie. And then, has the family situation that takes him out of the loop for, about 5 or 6 weeks there, and then comes back, gets hurt. The season just it wasn't what you really would hope for your first round rookie, for a guy you're relying on a whole lot. I think that those 2 aspects, the injury and the absence, are something the Chiefs are going to have to look at and say, okay, like, is this a guy that we can rely on to stay on the field in the future? And I think on the back end of his family related absence, that he was real appreciative to the Chiefs and to the team for letting him do that and not causing problems with that, but supporting him in that. And I think he made it clear that he's going to kind of return the favor in terms of, working his tail off. So I would expect him to come out and continue to improve. Omar Norman-Lott, he was a guy who was coming on like really strong towards the time he got injured. Unfortunate with the ACL injury. Fans were a little bit frustrated with the team putting some weight on him. I think he got bulked up a little bit. He was a little undersized coming out of college, and the fans saw his undersized quickness, pass rushing ability as like the staple for this guy. But I think, with the NFL, they're looking at putting like strength and bulk on these guys to make sure that they can hold up to the NFL game. And, I think that was kind of the idea there, and I think it backfired a little bit on them, and it took him time to adjust to what that was and adjust to the NFL game, and then he adjusts to it, gets hurt. So obviously, we'll have to see how he comes back from that injury. That's a little up in the air. I know he's expected to be ready for week 1, so that's a good thing. Okay. And then there's obviously a couple other guys in there. I think Jalen Royals, he had knee issues in training camp in the preseason and didn't really play much this year. He was kind of a red shirt type, where we didn't really get to see what all he was capable of or made of. Then you got Ashton Gelati, who's a guy who won the team's Rookie of the Year award. So that's always a positive thing. It shows that it's voted on by the players. So it shows that he's earned the respect of his teammates, and that that he's on the right track there, on the right path. Null Williams, like I mentioned earlier, was one of the brightest young cornerback prospects, in the league this year. He had a few hiccups this season, and where I think that Steve Spagnuolo took him, out for whatever reason. He kind of said it was, they had a couple different personnel packages and he wasn't in them, and they didn't get to the ones that had Noel in them. And I think that they kind of played themselves in a sense, and just sticking to kind of those rigid personnel packages and not finding a way to get a player who was very much so one of the best cornerbacks, rookie cornerbacks, and just cornerbacks in general in the league this year on the field. And I do think that sometimes they might have taken him out because he did have some penalty issues at times.
Okay.
So they might have, kind of switched him in and out because of that. But, there's just a lot to like there. Definitely has starter potential, like I mentioned. By the end of the season, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bassa, so we got him in. And is that
Bassa, it? No, so then Brashard Smith, running back. Yeah. Right now, the running back position is one of the most intriguing for Kansas City because they only have 2 guys who are on the roster as of right now. And that would be Brashard Smith and Shanderick Powell, who's an undrafted free agent who didn't even play last year. So you got like a 7th round second-year player and an undrafted free agent who's never played an NFL snap before. Like that position needs a whole lot of work.
Yes, it does. And I'm saying this from the outside. I don't know what the fans are. I know they probably have a liking to Kareem Hunt, but here's the way I'm looking at it is, well, we just talked about the patching of the holes and things of that nature, and they had to do that and, glue, stick, and all that kind of stuff. And to me, that's what Kareem Hunt is. It is now time to say, Kareem Hunt, you've done a great job here. We appreciate it. It is time to get younger. And that's just the case because he doesn't want to come back unless he's going to be a part of something. But you just can't keep giving that type of a player that much playing time. It's just not good. You need productive, young, fresh legs. And do you think that the fan base agrees?
Yes, but I do think there's a role for Kareem Hunt in that he was super efficient on short yardage.
Yeah, he was. He was.
Like if you bring him back and you have him as your goal line, short yardage back,
that's
in that defined role, that's fine.
Yeah.
Even if you put him in there knowing that like he's probably the best pass pro back that you had last season as well. So if you bring him back knowing he'll probably be on the cheaper side, you have to have that type of defined role for him. You can't have him as your number 1 guy. No, and with Brashard Smith, right, where he has to improve, and Andy Reid has been pretty clear about this over the last several months of the season. It was that, Brashard Smith, he's a wide receiver playing running back, right? He's built like a wide receiver still. He needs to reshape his body and change the way his physique is to fit more of a running back play style. He showed that he had the juice to play the position, but I think the fear is, can he hold up over a period of time and take the punishment that an NFL running back is going to take? And I think that the Chiefs felt no, which is why he did not see more opportunities out there. And how he treats this offseason, how he attacks this offseason, and how he shows up, when the guys get to training camp is going to define his future with this team.
Okay. All right. So those are the young players. Before we get into free agency, I want to ask you about some of these injuries. We've kind of talked about some of them already. So obviously, the big one, Patrick Mahomes. What do you think realistically is the time frame?
Yeah, so I spoke to an orthopedic surgeon, did an interview with him from the Tennessee Bone and Joint Institute, and he kind of explained to me some of the nitty gritty details of the injury. One of the things that I was confused about when we were learning about the injury, Rick Burkholder came out and he mentioned an avulsion injury, and I'm like, "What? I've never heard that term before. I'm not a doctor. What is
Yeah.
that?" But there's a couple different ways that you can tear a ligament in your knee. But an avulsion injury is basically where it tears and rips off a piece of bone. So the ligament itself is not torn, right? It's not like cut down the middle and torn, but it's actually like a microfracture and disconnects from the bone that it's attached to on one side or the other. So that's actually a good thing in terms
Okay.
of the ability to heal, right? Because you don't have to deal with like a graft or anything like that. You're dealing with bone on bone healing. So that's a lot easier to deal with than your body dealing with like a cadaver graft or something like that. So he has that going for him. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that can go wrong when you have LCL and
Hmm.
PL injuries. There's nerves and different ligaments and tendons and stuff like that. He avoided all of that type of damage, which is really, really good. That's the stuff that you really fear for in these types of injuries that can alter careers. So he avoided that. I think week one is realistic, knowing who he is, how he goes about his craft and his business and his rehab work. At the same time, I think that Chiefs fans have to kind of, understand that this is a tough injury, right? And that there's some variance there. 9 to 11 months is kind of the framing and the window, and you could be on the shorter end of that, or you could be on the longer end of that, and it all just kind of depends on a couple different things. And the Julie Freimeyer has said it about Patrick Mahomes on one of these documentaries or what have you. I think it was maybe the franchise, the team's documentary or something like that. But she called Mahomes an impatient patient. And I think he's really going to have to lean into and trust the training staff in understanding that this is not something you can rush, that
That's right.
you really have to take the little wins as you go, and listen to your body. There's a possibility that maybe he's not ready for week one. I think that's a realistic possibility
Okay.
at this time with the information I have and what I know and what I believe. I think he's going to be ready for week one.
Okay. And as far as the others, we've talked about a few of them. How's Azuma?
Yeah, so this is a make or break for Felix, right? He missed the entire season with an injury. Going into this last year, it felt like a make or break for him in that he really hadn't contributed much. I think he was around the way for not a breakout season, but a contributing year where he would make a positive contribution and not just be just a guy.
Yeah.
And this is very much so in my eyes the last shot, because they can't afford to have him taking up a roster spot and not being productive. So you got to come back. You got to come back strong. You got to come back healthy, and you got to come back prepared to make your case, because year after this, right, you're a free agent. So I don't know at this juncture if the Chiefs would pick up an option year for him. I doubt it, to be frank. And so you're talking about not just your Chiefs career here, but your NFL career. You've got to go out and show that you're capable, that you can do something, or you might be done if you're in Felix's shoes.
Joshua Williams and Nazay Johnson. What's their situation?
I would be surprised if Joshua Williams is back. I think that this last year it was kind of apparent that, he hadn't taken the steps forward that they wanted him to take, and he was kind of relegated to special teams duty. I think he can be a starter for another team. It's just a matter of finding that opportunity. Najee Johnson, I know he wants to be back in Kansas City. I think it's going to have to be like a wait and see, like right price type of thing. Um, the Chiefs are obviously going to be strapped for cash, and I think they're going to be looking towards making improvements more so than retaining guys who were on the team this past year.
Okay. So both of those guys most likely moving on. All right. And besides some of the players we've already talked about, let's see, we've talked about Roland Wallace.
One guy I could see coming back, Brian Cook, starting free safety, made a pretty big jump forward this past season. Well liked. I could see him coming back. I could also see a situation where he's maybe a little out of their price range and they go outside, find a free agent to kind of fill that free safety spot. I know there's some guys out there. One I like is Jalen Thompson from the Arizona Cardinals. I think he could be a really perfect fit for what they're looking for.
Okay. All right. So let's get into that then, the free agency part, and we'll start in that secondary because you mentioned Cook already. What about Jalen Watson?
Yeah, I think there's no shot. I mean, the one way I could see the Chiefs maybe retaining him is if they were to get an outstanding offer for Trent McDuffie, trade Trent McDuffie. They suddenly have more cap space than they were expecting to have, and they could go and sign Watson. The only issue I have with that is then, one of Noel Williams or Christian Fulton is probably getting relegated to a backup role because, Fulton's played some like nickel before, but I don't think it's really his calling. And so, Watson, I think more likely than not, he's probably on his way out.
Okay.
Leo Chenal, I know the team loves the player, but I think for what he's going to command on the open market, I don't think his role on the Chiefs is something where they can pay what he's going to be commanding on the open market. So I'd be surprised to see him back as well.
Okay. Yeah. Because Chenal and Cook, and you mentioned, of course, Watson too. Those three, would those three be considered the top three defensive free agents?
I would definitely say those three are the top three.
Okay. All right. The defensive line, Tillery, Noddy, Pennell, they're all going to just go, right? Unless they come back on the very cheap.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised to see any of those guys back. I think the way they handled the interior defensive line last season was not ideal. And, my understanding is they don't want to have to repeat that same type of situation. They traded for the Jets to get Noddy after he had already left in free agency. And then
it's not good.
Pennell, they cut him at 53-man roster cuts because they didn't want to pay him and keep him on the 53. They wanted him to go on the practice squad. And he was saying, no way, Jose. He went and joined the Cincinnati Bengals. And then, he comes back, he forces his way out of Cincy midseason, comes back to Kansas City. It wasn't good process. They need to invest there, whether it's adding, a little bit more in terms of free agent value, or, they're going to be in prime position, in my opinion, with that pick number 40. If they don't, have a guy they like at number 9 who's interior defensive line, I think pick number 40, you're going to have, guys like Lee Hunter, Caleb Banks, a couple of these big body defensive linemen who could potentially be options for your team right there.
Okay. Also, what about Amenahu? Is it time for him to move on?
I think it probably will be. I know, I think he's looking for, something more than what he's found in Kansas City. I know he's taken a couple, I think last year he was on a 1-year deal. I think he was hoping to, the season when he got injured, earn like a long-term contract extension. And, I don't think he's on the other side of the injury been quite as dominant as a player as he was before it. Maybe he gets back to that. I just don't see it happening in KC.
Okay. Offensively, we've kind of touched up on Hunt. What about Pacheco?
I would be surprised if Pacheco is back. I know that they really like the kid. He's had some big moments for this team, but he's also had some injury troubles. He doesn't have the greatest of vision. Doesn't always choose the right running lane, right rushing lane. I think that that position group is in need of a near complete overhaul. If anyone's coming back, it's probably going to be Hunt, and I'd genuinely be surprised if Pacheco is back with KC.
Okay, now the wide receiver room. So this is really interesting because you have 3 of the top 5 receivers in snaps who are free agents this past year: Brown, Thornton, and Smith-Schuster. So out of those 3, which one is the most likely, if any, to return?
I'll say Juju is probably the most likely, and I know fans probably won't like to hear that because he's been a solid contributor, but like nothing outstanding. I think he's a really good vet to have in the room, a guy who's a good wide receiver 5 for your team. Like he can eat snaps and be competent. I think Hollywood Brown probably going to look for another opportunity. Tyquan Thornton, guy I know they would like back, but potentially in a situation where he started off the season really hot and then the Chiefs kind of benched him in favor of other guys, and he didn't really see many opportunities late in the season, and it didn't really feel fair for him and for a guy who was performing so well to not get more opportunities. Okay. I think he's going to want to go somewhere else, is the impression that I get. And, the Chiefs do have some questions at the wide receiver position, right? Rashee Rice got in trouble again, quote unquote.
Again.
Right?
This is not good.
And look, I mean, I say in trouble. I guess it's loosely. He was in the media for the wrong reasons. To my knowledge, nothing has come of this yet. Obviously, it's a concerning situation because he was on probation. So if something were to come from that and his probation were revoked, well, then, it's not just an instance of, okay, the NFL is going to suspend you. He could really be facing jail time. And that's a scary situation for a young man. And I really hope that, whatever's going on in his life, that he figures it out, because he's really talented kid and could have a lot of success if he could keep himself out of trouble. So that's a situation they'll have to navigate. The Chiefs are no strangers to this. They had to deal with a situation that was somewhat similar, I feel like, with Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
So we'll see. I think the one thing that's clear here, you don't know what you have in Jalen Royals. Xavier Worthy's coming off a season that was a bit of a disappointment because, he had the shoulder injury in the first game, had an ankle injury that kind of nagged him throughout the season. He didn't have the second year that he was hoping for, or the Chiefs were hoping for. I think they're hoping he can bounce back, but they need more guys at the wide receiver spot. And, you look at where they are in the NFL draft, and they could have a strong chance that, okay, maybe the top receiver is still on the board when you come on the clock at number 9.
Yeah.
And knowing where you're at the wide receiver group right now, that's got to be something that they consider, especially if they don't make a strong investment there during free agency.
Do they try to bring back Minshew?
I don't think so. I would expect that they probably won't. And just that my feeling on that is right. The report that kind of came out after, the season was ending. I think it was Adam Schefter tweeted something out that Gardner Minshew didn't tear his ACL. He's actually fully healthy now and looking forward to, finding a new home or whatever it may be. Right. But, so my impression was this was knowledge that we knew when he had that knee injury, that he didn't tear his ACL. We knew that pretty quickly the next week, the following week after that game. But the way it was framed within the media felt very much so like an agent trying to get the news out there that his guy is going to be available and needs an opportunity. So I don't get the impression that Minshew is going to be back. They signed Jake Haener, who's a former 4th-round pick, I believe, for the New Orleans Saints. Yeah. They signed him to a reserve future deal. I think he's a guy that they like, that they think can actually truly compete for a backup quarterback spot. And at the very least is going to be competing with Chris Oladakunt for that number 3 spot.
Okay, and Caliendo's a restricted free agent. Any reason to think he won't return?
I would be surprised. I think that, Hunter Norzad and CJ Hansen are guys that they like and that they've invested draft capital in. And, as a restricted free agent, it's not like a big investment to bring a guy like Caliendo back, but I just think that Caliendo hasn't taken the steps forward that they really need. With Trey Smith out and him kind of filling in there a little bit, I just feel like you've seen what he's capable of at a starting level clip 2 seasons in a row now, and I think you probably would ideally like to find a guy who can raise the floor a little bit there, because I think you just know what you have in Caliendo.
Okay, now we wrap it up with the big one, and that is team needs. So we've already been through a lot of that during the course of the discussion here, but let's just get right down to it. I guess the first question I'm going to ask you is there a position of need that every fan in Kansas City knows is absolutely number 1? Or would you say that it's more of a mixed bag?
I'd say running back is probably like number 1 right now. Like they just can't go into the season with the guys they have.
Does that mean that Love is a possibility?
I think Love's a strong possibility, especially if they bring back Dalen McCullough, who was at Notre Dame and was the coach who recruited him to Notre Dame.
I didn't know that. Okay.
All right. If they bring him back as the running back coach, I would not be shocked if he's the pick. He knows better than anybody else how much of a game changer this kid can be. And look, my opinion on how the Chiefs combat the fact that Patrick Mahomes is coming back from a serious knee injury, they've invested a ton of money in this offensive line. It needs to be the best running offensive line in football, and they need to build themselves the best running game in football to complement what they have in Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
That would take so much stress off of the quarterback if they had a strong running game, and going out and investing in a player like Love would help you do that. And you could even make a strong investment in a running back in free agency and still go get Love. If they went and got like a Tyler Algier in free agency and then went and drafted Love, I wouldn't mind that strategy. I think that would be a way to get what could give you the best possible iteration of this offense and really have a threatening running game to complement what you want with that explosive passing game.
Well, we did our first mock draft with Dave Syvertson and John Cooper, our top 2 scouts at Ourlads. And let's see, they had pass rusher going to the Chiefs at number 9, keeping in mind just before the Chiefs drafted, they went with Love to New Orleans, which is definitely a possibility as well, with their backfield all banged up the way that it is. So that could be interesting. If Love is on the board at 8, the Saints might be thinking about it. Would you think that if the Chiefs really, really wanted Love, that they would want to maybe make a move, or would you say, nah, they're not? Because they need more draft capital. They can't be giving up draft capital to move up a couple spots.
I would be surprised to see them, give up some capital to move up.
Okay.
I really would, and I'd be surprised with a pick like Howell because he just doesn't really fit. Okay. He doesn't fit Steve Spagnuolo and what he's looking for. He likes the big, long, heavy pass rushers who aren't necessarily as explosive but can set the edge. I would probably say Keldrick Falk would be more of a Chiefs fit than Howell would, even with Howell being a Kansas City native. I would see that being more of a fit. But and then as far as the defensive pass rusher in round one, I mean, it's a huge need for this team. Like if
Would
they're
that be
not
number two?
if they're not going for, I don't know if it'd be number two, some mix of edge and defensive tackle in my eyes.
Okay.
They just need another guy there who can win one-on-one. They don't have it right now. They have Chris Jones, and he's not getting any younger. They need somebody who can just consistently win those one-on-one matchups, whether it's an edge rusher or defensive tackle to pair with Jones. They got to find that guy. And, I'm a huge Ruben Bain fan. I would love that pick for the Chiefs, but I don't know that he's going to be there.
So you say Falk out of these edge rushers around that area, Falk is the best fit?
I would say from a fit standpoint, he's the one who fits them best. I would say Parker is probably the number two there in terms of fit, but I don't think he's going as high as number 9. I think if they were going to go with a Parker type, they might.
And what about defensive tackle fit?
Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, Lee Hunter. Those are guys, but I'd be targeting that more like pick number 40. I think.
Sure.
I think number 9 might be a little too high. I think maybe Woods might be the guy that I see going that high, and maybe Hunter. He's had a really good pre-draft process. I could see him.
I could
see him rising up boards and going as high as 14, 15 in that area. But
I wouldn't be surprised either. Yeah.
I would take him at number 9. I like him. I like him a lot. But no, I mean, I could see that kind of be a combination of the number 2, number 3, some combination of D tackle and defensive end.
Okay.
Then I go to the wide receiver position as my next area of need. And I mean, I don't know how many receivers went in that mock draft, but I would see that spot as a place to maybe take a receiver.
Tyson and Tate.
Tyson and Tate. So maybe Mekhi Lemon. I could see him.
Yeah, Lemon's our next one. Yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely see him being a guy for Kansas City. I know he's more of like a slot only type of receiver, but man, his numbers and his tape are just really impressive. I could see him. I could see him definitely being a guy that the Chiefs fall in love with and taking at that number 9 spot.
Yeah, and keep in mind, of course, you got with Tyson, a lot's going to depend on his medical, and every team might be different.
And look, I mean, if he doesn't go early on, that kind of tells you, okay, medicals might not be right. And the Chiefs just last season, they took a medical guy at number they were going to take him at number 31, then they traded down and took him at number 32, right? So
that's right.
I could see the team falling in love with a guy like Jordan Tyson. And they've got a wide receiver coach now in Chad O'Shea, who's coached some really great wide receivers. Wes Welker, some of the other guys at New England. He coached Randy Moss to one of his best seasons he's ever had. Julian Edelman, he coached up. So, he can turn some of these guys into great players. So, I think if you give him a good canvas, he can paint a pretty picture.
Okay, so I know how much Andy Reid wants and would love to have an offensive guy with that first pick. So let's just say, for whatever reason, Love has been drafted. The right wide receiver just it's not Reid's fit. But Sadiq is on the board, which he will be. Knowing Travis Kelce is just he's on borrowed time now. He'll probably come back one more year. But it's about time that they now have to start looking. And would that be a surprise to you?
I would be surprised if Kenyon Sadiq is a guy. I just don't think, knowing that historically first round tight ends aren't, they don't have the best success rate. And just in general, like tight ends usually take a year or two to kind of adjust to the league. I'd be surprised. I think, this year, I think Kelce comes back. I'm of the opinion that he'll come back. I think he'll sign like a 2-year deal, but the second year will probably be like an option year of some sort,
Sure.
where like the team will not guarantee any money, and he can just decide to walk away or whatever it may be. Um, but I think they got Jake Briningstool, a guy who I know they really like, who
That's
kind of
true.
had a redshirt year. Jared Wiley is still a relative unknown because he just hasn't played a whole lot because he obviously had the knee injury last year and was kind of bouncing back from that this year. He played a little bit, but more of a tertiary role. So I mean, they've still got some things to figure out about that position group, and I think you bringing Kelsey back and going a little lean there, or maybe finding like a guy whose primary role is to block. I think they could use a good blocking tight end. That could be something that they look into, or finding someone who's maybe maybe not even a blocking tight end, but like kind of the like H-back fullback type of role. I know Andy Reid loves having a fullback, and they just haven't really had that last couple of years. Eric Bieniemy coming back, they had a fullback the whole time that he was there, so I think that could be a role that they like try to look to bring back, and that could help offset the need for a traditional type tight end replacement for Kelsey. But I think they're going to hold off on finding that replacement type for him, and
Okay.
I don't see Sadiq as an option really there at number 9.
And what would be pick number 5? Need number 5.
Need number 5. I'm going to say safety actually. With Brian Cook being a free agent, Mike Edwards, Dean Bush, Chamari Connor has not had it was not a great year for him this last year. He needs kind of a reduced role, I think. Jaden
What about Hicks? Yeah. What about
he's
Hicks?
a guy who had a really great rookie season and then did not really take a step forward. And in fact, probably took a couple steps backward in his sophomore season. So that's a guy that you want to be able to have to kind of step up, right? So lots of questions there. I think Chris Roland Wallace is probably the guy that I feel most confident in out of that group, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then, they just signed this kid, Tanner McAllister, former Ohio State Buckeye, who I know that they like is kind of that, maybe like fourth special teams type role guy. So, maybe, that position group is set and they go leaner there. But man, I could really see them adding someone. And this is a deep defensive back draft in terms of safety position. Feel like they could find a guy, rounds 1 through 5, really, who can contribute. Definitely a good year. Caleb Downs is the guy that I actually really like at the number 9 spot. Like if the draft falls a certain way, I could very much see him being like the best available player for the Chiefs at number 9.
Yeah, it's another situation like Ruben Bain is that I don't know if those guys will drop. I think Downs would definitely have a better shot playing the role that he does, but I love him as we all should. I mean, Downs is a phenomenal player. He's going to be a phenomenal pro, as it looks like Bain will too. So we'll see. Anything's possible. Okay, so safety rounds it out. Running back first. Defensive line next, wide receiver after that. And that does it for our one more before I go. We do have a question, and that basically comes from Grandizer 12. So he really just wants to know about the Tyreek Hill situation. Can you see Tyreek Hill back with the Chiefs?
Yeah, I could absolutely see him back with the Chiefs. The problem is he has a serious knee injury, right? And it's the type of knee injury that's like, even when it happened, right? Being back and ready for week 1, knowing what his skill set is and whatnot, I would be really, really shocked if he was able to get back out there by week 1. I won't be shocked if he's the type of guy who doesn't even sign a contract with a team until like the mid-season mark. I could see like him being the guy who like, okay, some team misses out on the trade deadline and they're like, okay, I'm going to sign Tyreek Hill and see what he's got. I think that's probably the scenario because, I think he's 31 years old.
Getting up there.
Right. I mean, his skill set completely predicated on his speed, his ability to cut, move quickly. He does have some other skills and abilities, right? He's probably better at like high pointing, catching contested catches than guys would give him credit for at his size and whatnot. But man, I just don't know if you're ever going to get the same player. So, if the Chiefs find themselves in a pickle and they need a wide receiver and he's available, I could definitely see the reunion being something that they explore, but I don't know that you can expect a whole lot out of it.
Charles, you do a great job. I really appreciate it every time we have you on. It helps me definitely improve my knowledge of the Kansas City Chiefs immensely, especially if I wind up getting the opportunity to report on them with the Ourlads 2026 draft guide that's coming out. We have profiles of all 32 teams. So if that's the case, then it makes my life a lot easier. So I do appreciate that. And for all of our viewers as well, where could we see you next? You're just going to be still doing most of the time we see you, it's on programs like this. You're like a free agent.
Yeah, no, I like to hop on other people's shows. I don't have my own podcast or anything fun like that, but you can always find all my writing over at a2zsports.com at goldmct NFL. It's my @ over there on X, and same thing over on Blue Sky and what have you. But just progressing through the off season, trying to enjoy a little time off when I can get it, but also trying to bring you guys as much Chiefs coverage as I can. So we'll see what we got cooking this off season. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, we have links in the description of this video for all of that, so you can follow Charles, look at his work, and we look forward to talking to Charles no later than right after the draft, when, like you said, pretty much, even though this season could be, that's when we'll really know about what the Chiefs roster is going to look like instead of past free agency. So a lot to talk about with the Chiefs this offseason. It's great for you to give us that head start, Charles, as always, and I look forward to talking to you hopefully right after the draft.
It'll be fun. I can't wait.
Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it. All right, that's Charles Goldman covering the Chiefs for A to Z Sports. That's one of 3 NFL team offseason previews that we're going to give you this week on Proline TV and the Ourlads Football Network. Later this week, we'll be talking about the Washington Commanders, as well as, who are we talking about also later this week? The Houston Texans. That's also on board. That's going to be on Thursday when we talk about the Houston Texans with Cole Thompson. We'll see you later tonight when we preview the golf event, the PGA Tour golf event at Pebble Beach. That's later tonight at 8 o'clock, hopefully, right here on Proline TV. For Charles Goldman, I'm Greg DePalma. Again, we'll see you next time talking NFL.